March 26, 2018, the morning fog rolls heavy across the jagged coastline of Mendocino County, California, clinging to the asphalt of the Pacific Coast Highway. A passing motorist spots a glint of metal resting far below the highway edge and pulls over, expecting a standard traffic accident. 100 feet down, shattered against the rocky surf, a pristine GMC Yukon sits upside down in the incoming tide. First responders scale down the treacherous dirt inclined to reach the wreckage, bringing extraction tools and immense hope for survivors. Inside the crushed cabin and ejected across the sharp coastal rocks, they find the lifeless bodies of 2 adult women and 3 young children. 3 more children are missing from the immediate wreckage. Law enforcement officers begin sweeping the dirt pull-off high above the Pacific Ocean, scanning the ground for the telltale black rubber streaks of a desperate driver attempting to brake. They find bare dirt. The complete absence of skid marks changes the atmosphere on the cliffside, transforming a tragic coastal accident into a calculated, deliberate act of absolute devastation. Before the vehicle ever left the edge of that California cliff, the Hart household operated as a masterpiece of public relations. Jennifer and Sarah Hart, a married couple presenting themselves as progressive saviors, built an elaborate digital stage for their family. Their journey into motherhood began with the adoption of 2 separate sibling groups originating from the foster care system in Texas. Marcus, Hannah, and Abigail arrived first in 2006, bringing their own deep sibling bond into the home. 3 years later, in 2009, the couple finalized the adoption of Devante, Jeremiah, and Sayar, merging the 2 groups into a massive household of 8 people. On social media platforms, the mothers broadcast streams of joy and adventure to the outside world. The photographs showed the children wearing colorful clothing, attending summer music festivals, holding hand-made signs at peace rallies, and hiking through lush national parks. Viewers scrolling through these galleries saw an idyllic modern family conquering the world with love and compassion. The mothers crafted long, emotional posts detailing their dedication to raising these vulnerable children. Society rewarded them with endless praise and validation for their selflessness. The public narrative solidified around the idea of 2 heroes rescuing 6 siblings from troubled pasts. The pinnacle of this curated public image materialized in November 2014 during a tense protest in Portland, Oregon. Demonstrators gathered to march against police violence following events in Ferguson, Missouri. Among the crowd stood 15-year-old Devante Hart, wearing a hand-painted sign offering free hugs to strangers. A freelance photographer captured a moment where Devante, tears streaming down his face, embraced a uniformed Portland police officer in the middle of the street. The image exploded across global media networks within hours, becoming a defining symbol of hope and reconciliation. News anchors interviewed Jennifer Hart, who provided moving commentary about her son and his immense capacity for love. She positioned herself as the guiding force behind his emotional depth and social awareness. The photograph elevated the family to celebrity status in progressive circles. Strangers sent them gifts, festival tickets, and massive amounts of internet adoration. Behind the glowing screens, the reality of the children's existence involved intense isolation and systematic deprivation. The mothers weaponized this newfound fame, using it as an impenetrable shield against any outside scrutiny. The public saw a thriving teenager, but the biological reality showed a boy suffering from severe, long-term malnutrition. To understand the nightmare, one must examine the physical geography of the Hart family homes over the years. They favored rural, secluded properties surrounded by dense woods or tall privacy fences. They structured the physical layout of their properties to keep the children isolated from neighboring eyes. The mothers pulled all 6 children out of the traditional public school system, citing a desire to provide a superior, customized education. In reality, this removal severed the children's only connection to mandated reporters, teachers, and school counselors. Inside the walls of these isolated houses, a rigid militaristic order replaced the carefree festival lifestyle shown online. The mothers installed alarms on the children's bedroom doors to track their movements throughout the night. Food became a primary weapon of control and submission. The mothers withheld basic nutrition for days at a time, punishing the children for minor perceived infractions. The children learned to move in absolute silence through their own home, shrinking themselves to avoid drawing attention. They spent their days confined to small spaces, completing grueling chores or sitting in silence while their mothers browsed social media. The pristine public facade required absolute compliance from the captive audience living inside the house. Despite the crushing weight of their environment, the children maintained profound bonds with one another. Marquis, the eldest, attempted to shoulder the burden of the punishments to spare his younger siblings from the mother's wrath. Hannah and Abigail possessed a quiet resilience, finding small moments of comfort in each other's presence during the long hours of banishment to their bedrooms. Jeremiah and Sierra clung to their older brother Devonte, who carried the immense pressure of being the family's most visible public face. The 6 siblings possessed individual dreams, vibrant personalities, and an innate desire for normal childhood experiences. They yearned for basic human necessities like school, friendships, adequate meals, and freedom of movement outside the property lines. The mothers crushed these desires through emotional manipulation, forcing the children to smile for the camera before sending them back into starvation. The contrast between the brilliant flash of the camera lens and the dark, quiet corners of their bedrooms defined their entire existence. Every forced family vacation served as a chaotic, stressful production designed to generate new content for the mother's online followers. The children functioned as captive actors in a staged reality show, enduring immense suffering to maintain a fiction they did not choose. The systemic failure of multiple state agencies to recognize their pain set the stage for a final devastating climax. The maintained illusion began to fracture in March 2018 in Woodland, Washington. The family had relocated to this rural community, purchasing a 2-story house on a secluded 2-acre plot of land. The physical layout of the Woodland property featured a long gravel driveway, towering evergreen trees, and significant distance between the house and the main road. The nearest neighbors, Bruce and Dana DeKalb, lived in a home separated from the Hart property by a long stretch of grass and a wire fence. The DeKalbs enjoyed a quiet existence in the rural Pacific Northwest, but they noticed disturbing patterns emerging from the property next door. The Hart children remained indoors at all times, and the house projected an unnatural silence during the day. The isolation felt palpable, standing in stark contrast to the massive family size. This physical setup provided the perfect environment for hidden abuse. But the hunger driving the children pushed them to break the strict rules of their confinement. The desperation reached a boiling point, forcing the children to seek help beyond the property lines. The DeKalbs found it strange that a household with 6 children generated zero noise. No laughter echoed across the fence, and no bicycles lay abandoned in the driveway. The pristine condition of the yard mirrored the sterile, controlled environment inside the house. The children existed as ghosts in their own neighborhood. Over the course of a single week in mid-March, 15-year-old Devonte began crossing the property line to approach the DeKalb residence. He navigated the distance between the properties multiple times a day, scanning the yard to ensure his mothers were not watching. Devonte presented a startling image to his neighbors. Despite his age, his severe malnutrition left him looking like a much younger, smaller child. He knocked on the DeKalb's door and asked for basic food items like tortillas, peanut butter, and cured meats. He spoke in hushed, hurried tones, terrified of lingering on the porch. Devonte confided in Bruce and Dana that his mothers used food deprivation as a primary method of punishment for him and his siblings. He explained that they were starving, enduring days without a single meal in the dark confines of their home. He pleaded with the neighbors to keep his visits a secret, knowing the consequences awaiting him if Jennifer or Sarah discovered his actions. His escalating desperation painted a harrowing picture of the conditions inside the two-story house next door. The frequency of his visits increased, transforming from cautious requests into frantic pleas for survival. The teenager carried the weight of his starving siblings on his shoulders, risking intense physical punishment to secure a few scraps of food. He requested that the DeKalbs leave boxes of food by the fence line so he could smuggle the rations back into his house under the cover of darkness. Bruce and Dana DeKalb weighed the teenager's pleas against a chilling memory from the previous year. Months prior, in the middle of the night, one of the Hart daughters had appeared on their doorstep under similar distressing circumstances. She had thrown herself from a second-story window, crossed the dark yard, and begged the DeKalbs to hide her from her adoptive mothers. She pleaded for sanctuary and asked for a way to reach her biological family in Texas. The neighbors had contacted the authorities during that previous incident, but the mothers spun a convincing web of lies to explain away the girl's actions. The mothers blamed the incident on behavioral issues, using their polished public image to deceive the responding officers. Now standing face to face with a starving Devante, the DeKalbs realized the danger had escalated beyond control. The physical evidence of starvation standing on their porch required immediate, decisive intervention. On the morning of March 23, 2018, Bruce DeKalb picked up his telephone and placed a formal call to Child Protective Services. He detailed the food deprivation, the teenagers' stunted growth, and the recurring attempts by the children to escape the property. This single telephone call initiated an irreversible chain of events, triggering a sudden panic inside the Hart residence. The bureaucratic machinery of the state welfare system began its slow turn toward the isolated property in Woodland. Later that same day, a social worker arrived at the end of the long gravel driveway. The worker walked up the wooden steps to the front door of the Hart residence and delivered a series of heavy knocks. No one opened the door, and the house projected a facade of complete emptiness, following standard agency protocol. The worker left a business card wedged in the doorframe and departed the property. Inside the home, the arrival of the social worker shattered Jennifer and Sarah's constructed world. They understood that an active investigation would expose the starvation, the physical marks, and the profound trauma inflicted upon the 6 children. Rather than face the collapse of their social standing and inevitable criminal charges, the mothers enacted a chilling response. At 8:30 in the evening, they forced all 6 children into the family's GMC Yukon under the cover of darkness. The vehicle rolled down the gravel driveway, merging onto the highway and vanishing into the night. When child welfare workers returned to the property on March 26th and 27th for mandatory follow-up visits, they found an abandoned house. No vehicles sat in the driveway and no movement stirred behind the drawn blinds. A quiet panic gripped the local authorities as they realized a family of 8 had vanished without a trace. The simple act of a neighbor making a phone call had set a devastating final timeline into motion. On the morning of March 24, 2018, Clark County law enforcement arrived at the desolate Woodland property to assist the frustrated child welfare workers. Officers walked up the long gravel driveway and began a perimeter check of the silent 2-story structure. Through the first-floor windows, they observed a house in a state of suspended animation, offering no signs of a chaotic struggle or forced entry. Investigators secured a warrant and breached the front door, stepping into a sterile environment devoid of normal family clutter. The spatial layout revealed locked bedroom doors and bare walls, reflecting a prison rather than a sanctuary. Detectives discovered the family's toothbrushes still resting on the bathroom sinks, while winter coats remained hung securely in the closets. The complete absence of packed luggage or travel preparations indicated a sudden, desperate flight to evade the impending state intervention. Law enforcement officers initiated a standard missing persons protocol, broadcasting the license plate of the family vehicle to neighboring jurisdictions. However, the rigid protocols governing regional dispatch centers meant the alert remained localized within the Pacific Northwest. Officers initially treated the situation as a routine custodial dispute, failing to grasp the lethal danger closing in on the 6 captive children. As hours ticked by in the empty house, detectives began pulling the family's historical records from regional databases. This routine background check cracked the pristine digital facade, exposing a hidden trail of violence stretching across multiple state lines. The digital inquiry revealed a staggering systemic failure rooted deep in Douglas County, Minnesota, dating back to the year 2010. Detectives reading the official transcripts discovered that a public school teacher had noticed deep, purple bruising covering 6-year-old Abigail's back and torso. The young girl confessed that her adoptive mothers had beaten her with a closed fist and shoved her head into cold water. Minnesota authorities launched a formal inquiry, forcing Jennifer and Sarah Hart into a hostile defensive posture against the legal system. In 2011, prosecutors offered a devastatingly lenient plea arrangement to resolve the mounting legal friction. Sarah Hart stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to a single count of misdemeanor domestic assault. In exchange for this minimal admission of guilt, prosecutors formally dismissed the far more serious charge of malicious punishment of a child. This specific legal loophole allowed the abusers to maintain custody and bypass mandatory, long-term state monitoring. The court ordered 90 days of a suspended sentence and 1 year of unsupervised probation, a penalty completely detached from the severity of the inflicted trauma. Within days of the court verdict, the mothers enacted a permanent strategy of evasion by formally withdrawing all 6 children from the public education system. They cited philosophical objections to the curriculum, utilizing the broad protections of homeschooling laws to sever the children from mandated reporters. The family packed their belongings and crossed state lines into Oregon, effectively wiping their slate clean and leaving the Minnesota social workers completely blind to their movements. Oregon authorities remained completely unaware of the active threat entering their jurisdiction, exposing a fatal flaw in the national child welfare infrastructure. Because no unified, mandatory interstate registry existed for past abuse convictions, the Hart mothers arrived in their new community with a clean, unblemished record. Detectives tracing the timeline found another missed opportunity in 2013, when Oregon officials received an anonymous tip regarding the extreme malnourishment of the children. A social worker conducted a brief visual assessment at the family home, interviewing the mothers in the front yard. Jennifer and Sarah utilized their refined manipulative tactics, blaming the children's small stature on their difficult biological backgrounds and alleged genetic conditions. The investigators accepted this medical alibi without demanding independent verification from an external pediatrician. The case was quietly closed due to a lack of actionable physical evidence, forcing the children back into total isolation. Behind the locked doors, the psychological torture intensified, with the mothers frequently forcing the siblings to stand perfectly still in dark corners for hours. The children learned that any attempt to seek outside help would only result in geographical relocation and harsher internal punishments. Law enforcement officers reviewing this timeline in 2018 realized the children had spent their entire lives trapped inside a moving cage. Every time a brave neighbor or teacher sounded an alarm, bureaucratic fragmentation provided the predators an easy exit route. The devastating realization settled over the Washington Command Center, confirming that the system had repeatedly armed the abusers with the exact knowledge needed to outsmart state interventions. While Washington detectives mapped this historical tragedy, a parallel horrific reality unfolded hundreds of miles south along the Pacific Coast Highway in California. On the afternoon of March 26, 2018, recovery crews stood at the edge of a rugged dirt pull-off in Mendocino County. The spatial geography of the scene presented a terrifying vertical drop, consisting of a sheer rock face plunging 100 feet directly into the crashing ocean tide. Below the cliff edge, the shattered frame of the dark-colored GMC Yukon rested upside down, battered relentlessly by the incoming coastal waves. Search and rescue divers navigated the treacherous rocky surf to extract the victims from the submerged cabin. They recovered the lifeless bodies of Jennifer and Sarah Hart, strapped heavily into the front seats of the crushed vehicle. Scattered across the sharp coastal rocks nearby, responders found the remains of Marcus, Jeremiah, and Abigail. The recovery teams initiated a frantic grid search along the shoreline, fighting the brutal ocean currents to locate Hannah, CR, and Devante. Early media reports suggested a tragic navigational error, assuming the heavy fog had blinded the driver during a late-night coastal drive. Investigators on the cliffside chased a frustrating dead end, searching the surrounding asphalt and dirt for any physical evidence of a blown tire or mechanical failure. They examined the guardrails and warning signs, attempting to reconstruct the trajectory of an out-of-control vehicle sliding off the dangerous curve. However, the undisturbed, pristine dirt of the highway shoulder provided a silent, damning testimony that shattered the accident theory entirely. Forensic crash reconstruction experts arrived to analyze the physical mechanics of the plunge, turning their attention to the vehicle's onboard computer systems. Technicians managed to extract the heavily damaged airgrok control module, often referred to as the vehicle's electronic black box, from the twisted metal wreckage. The data retrieved from this module painted a chilling, mechanical picture of the final seconds at the top of the cliff. The digital telemetry proved that the heavy vehicle did not career off the highway at a high rate of speed. Instead, the driver had navigated onto the wide dirt pull-off and brought the machine to a complete intentional stop facing the ocean. The module recorded a period of idling, representing a terrifying pause at the absolute edge of the abyss. Suddenly, the data showed the accelerator pedal being depressed to 100% throttle in a single deliberate motion. The engine revved violently, launching the vehicle forward across the remaining distance of the dirt pad. The absence of any braking input confirmed the driver maintained maximum acceleration as the front tires left the solid ground. Experts calculated that the vehicle vaulted airborne for a distance of 70 to 100 feet before gravity finally pulled it downward. The front end smashed into the jagged shoreline 100 feet below with devastating, unquantifiable force. This undeniable mechanical evidence transformed the coastal recovery mission into a sprawling investigation of a meticulously executed final act. With the mechanical reality established, California investigators secured federal warrants to examine the digital footprints left behind by the perpetrators. Technicians isolated Sarah Hart's cell phone data, tracing the device's internet activity during the long dark drive from Washington to California. The timeline revealed that as the vehicle traveled south along the remote coastal highways, the passenger engaged in a series of highly specific, disturbing web searches. Detectives staring at the digital logs found queries investigating the precise dosage required for a fatal overdose of over-the-counter allergy medications. The browser history showed repeated searches focusing heavily on diphenhydramine, the active sedative ingredient found in common 8 times. Further down the search log, a far more sinister query chilled the seasoned investigators to their core. Sarah Hart had specifically typed questions into the search engine asking if the process of death by drowning caused significant physical pain. These digital breadcrumbs proved the occupants of the front seat spent hours analyzing the most effective methods to guarantee absolute destruction. The adults had ample time to reconsider their actions during the hundreds of miles they drove, yet they continually pushed toward an irreversible conclusion. They utilized the isolation of the vehicle cabin to finalize their dark logistics, completely trapping the 6 children in the back rows. The illusion of the progressive, loving family dissolved completely into a landscape of premeditated cruelty and total control. The final puzzle pieces awaited discovery inside the local county morgue, where medical examiners prepared to extract the unseen biological truth from the victims. The final horrifying truths of the Hart family timeline did not emerge from the shattered metal on the shoreline, but from the sterile, bright confines of the Mendocino County morgue. Medical examiners initiated comprehensive toxicological screenings on the recovered bodies to understand the physical state of the occupants during their final descent. The chemical analysis of Jennifer Hart, the individual positioned firmly behind the steering wheel, returned a deeply disturbing data point. Her blood alcohol concentration registered at 0.102, a level sitting significantly above the legal driving limit. Family acquaintances and historical records consistently characterized Jennifer as someone who completely abstained from consuming alcohol in her daily life. This stark deviation from her normal behavior provided investigators with a chilling psychological insight into the mechanics of the event. Detectives concluded she required a chemical catalyst to override her natural human preservation instincts. She consumed the intoxicant deliberately, utilizing the substance to manufacture the necessary courage to drive her entire family into the void. The alcohol served as a tool to execute a calculated plan, ensuring her hands remained steady on the steering wheel as the vehicle idled on the dirt pull off. The escape from the Washington authorities had transformed into a premeditated death march orchestrated by a driver fully committed to absolute destruction. While the driver utilized alcohol, the toxicological results for the rest of the cabin revealed a far more sinister method of control. The laboratory reports confirmed the presence of massive quantities of diphenhydramine, the active sedative ingredient found in common over-the-counter allergy medications, in the systems of Sarah Hart and the children. The chemical concentration within Sarah reached unfathomable levels, equaling roughly 42 standard doses of the sedative. The children possessed equally significant amounts of the compound in their bloodstreams, stripping away any possibility that they remained awake and alert during the ordeal. This pharmacological evidence proved the mothers executed a systematic, deliberate sedation of their captives to prevent any physical struggle or last-minute attempts to escape the vehicle. Inside the tight spatial confines of the heavy sports utility vehicle, the children drifted into a chemically induced paralysis. On that foggy, desolate stretch of the California coast, the predators guaranteed their victims remained entirely helpless as the engine revved toward the cliff edge. The horrifying realization washed over the investigation team as they processed the magnitude of the betrayal. The very individuals who had built a massive social platform upon the concept of rescuing vulnerable youth had ultimately chosen to erase those same lives. The mothers preferred to obliterate their entire household rather than face the inevitable exposure of their lifelong deception and the total collapse of their public facade. The aftermath of the Cliffside tragedy left multiple communities grappling with profound shock and a deeply fractured child welfare system to establish a definitive, unassailable public record. Officials convened a Mendocino County coroner's jury in April 2019. This formal proceeding gathered inside a local California courthouse, marking the first time the county had utilized such an inquest in 52 years. The panel of jurors reviewed the crushing weight of the mechanical telemetry, the digital search histories, and the toxicological reports. Following careful deliberation, they delivered a unanimous, chilling verdict that formalized the timeline of terror. The jury ruled that Jennifer and Sarah Hart deliberately brought about their own ends, while each of the 6 children met a permanent fate at the hands of another. completely ruling out any theory of an accident. Simultaneously, specialized search and recovery teams spent agonizing weeks battling the relentless Pacific surf to reclaim the remaining victims. The bodies of Marcus, Jeremiah, and Abigail emerged from the rocky shoreline on the very first day of the investigation. Weeks later, the ocean currents surrendered the remains of CIR to the search crews walking the nearby beaches. Authorities eventually identified Hannah through complex genetic testing matching her biological markers to the recovered physical evidence. Despite extensive, prolonged searches along the treacherous coastline, 15-year-old Devante was never recovered from the deep waters. A legal decree officially declared him deceased in 2019, closing the physical search for the final captive of the Hart household, because the perpetrators engineered their own demise alongside their victims. The biological families and the public were permanently denied the catharsis of a traditional criminal trial. No judge would ever hand down a formal prison sentence, and no cross-examination would force the abusers to answer for their years of calculated torture. Instead, the horrific legacy of the Hart household ignited intense legislative debates across state capitals regarding the fatal flaws within the national child welfare infrastructure. Lawmakers analyzed the exact bureaucratic loopholes that permitted the couple to continuously outrun serious abuse allegations by simply packing their belongings and crossing a state border. The tragedy exposed the critical urgent necessity for a unified national database to track child endangerment reports across all 50 jurisdictions. The rigid protocols and localized communication networks had systematically failed 6 vulnerable siblings who repeatedly attempted to signal their distress to the outside world. The system demanded concrete physical proof of starvation, yet allowed the abusers to dictate the terms of every welfare check from the safety of their front porches. The true victims in this narrative were not the women who felt overwhelmed by the pressures of parenthood, but the 6 resilient children who endured unimaginable deprivation behind a facade of progressive perfection. Marcus, Hannah, Abigail, Devante, Jeremiah, and Sayar deserved a lifetime of genuine care, adequate nourishment, and basic human dignity. Their tragic fate remains a haunting reminder that the most dangerous predators do not always hide in dark alleys. Sometimes they operate in plain sight, wearing the mask of an ordinary, loving parent while capturing the applause of an unsuspecting world.